Hey, this is Kat.
And Jess.
You know, Mother She Wrote is free to listen to, but it's not free to make.
So please, consider supporting our work on Patreon or supporting Cast.
You'll get early, ad-free episodes of this show and a whole lot more.
Head to mothershewrote.earth/support to chip in and join our community of world-saving wonderkind.
Oh, and heads up, this episode contains passing mention of drug use, alcohol consumption, car crashes, gun violence, and kidnapping.
Please use your best judgment when listening, and take care of yourself.
Love you!
You cast your onyx hook into the ocean of consciousness and slide beyond, into another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of dreams. A dimension of love. You're crossing over into a realm of insightful interviews, expanding the themes and discussions of the Mother series. You've just been transported through a dimensional slip.
Welcome to Dimensional Slip, intermittent interludes in Mother She Wrote's journey, where we speak with guests from a multitude of backgrounds and further explore the themes, media, and fandom that make up the tapestry of the EarthBound experience. I'm the blip in your chip, surfing the saw waves of your heart. It's me, Kat Blackard, and with me is my sonic sweetheart.
I'm here with sampled salutations. It's Jessica Mudd.
In this episode, we're speaking with legendary chiptunes artist Matthew Applegate, aka Pixelh8, whose expertise on the musical mechanics of the 8-bit era is second only to the Nintendo engineers who built the darn things.
Music is an essential part of the Mother experience and the series' storytelling.
Those memorable melodies are more than just background music.
So much more. Throughout Mother She Wrote, you've heard us talk a lot about the incredible pop songs and themes of Mother, and the duo responsible for them, art rock musician Keiji Suzuki of the Moonriders, and Nintendo composer and chiptune pioneer Hirokazu Tanaka, better known as Hip or Chip Tanaka.
Often we find ourselves asking, how did they do this? It seems like they pushed the Nintendo Entertainment System hardware to the limit. So we're really excited to be able to speak with someone with such an in-depth understanding of how chiptunes work, both as a composer and a programmer. Plus, Pixelh8 happens to be a huge fan of Hip Tanaka's work.
We'll also learn more about the various eras of chiptune music, Pixelh8's work reclaiming computer chips from dying consoles to build new instruments, and excitingly, his return to the music scene with his new record, Hard Reset.
Yeah, Pixelh8 and I go way back to when I first started out as a media journalist. I did a few interviews with him on my first podcast, Nerdy Show, but 12 years ago, he stepped away from music to become a teacher.
He transitioned from a pioneering chiptune artist to a pioneering educator, founding the Creative Computing Club, an institution that tutors young people in computer programming, video game design, hardware programming, electronics, and robotics.
So there's a lot to talk to Pixelh8 about. In fact, we had such a big conversation, it can't fit into a single episode. So if you like this discussion, you can hear an alternate expanded cut of it over on Nerdy Show. Just search Nerdy Show on your podcast player.
But for now, it's been a while, so let's catch up with the latest Mother news and happenings in the Mother's Day times.
Wow, welcome back after a not-so-brief absence.
A lot has happened.
And a lot is happening.
We've got some big surprises in store for the final episodes of our first season. We're writing original songs, season-ending set pieces.
It's all coming together. We'll be back with the main story sooner than later. But on the sooner side of things, Jess and I are EarthBounding to Japan.
Yep, we're going to Japan. And you'd better believe we'll be getting up to some Mother mayhem. If you'll be in the Tokyo or Osaka area between May 9th and the 21st and want to meet up, drop us a line at dearmothershewrote@gmail.com.
That's dearmothershewrote@gmail.com. Or if you've got some recommendations for places we should go and things we should do, well, let us know that too. We'll be sure to share any findings and adventures of note in future Mother She Wrote installments. Now, on to some news.
This is a big year for the series. 2024 is Mother's 35th anniversary and Mother 2's 30th, leading to assorted celebrations and commemorative events, like Mother 3 being released on the Nintendo Switch.
But only in Japan.
Oh, as is the custom.
So it's no surprise that once again English-speaking fans were riled up, to the extent that Mother 3 was trending on social media.
With all this public talk asking why Mother 3 has never been officially released in English, Shigesato Itoi weighed in and said, Please talk to Nintendo about that, not me.
Yeah. Well, for this anniversary year, there's already been some interesting new interviews and recollections relating to the series. We'll cover those on a future episode.
Meanwhile, in the mother-like gaming sphere, Mother Forever's Cody Nokolo has launched a new podcast called RPG Potential. In it, Cody explores what it means for a game to be an RPG, discusses the best moments in the genre, and interviews developers. It's out now across all podcasting platforms, and we'll have links to it in this episode's page.
Now, the months since our last episode release have been cold and bleak. But thanks to you fine folks, our hearts remained warm. We received so many wonderful letters.
It's overwhelming. Thank you so much for writing in. We're going to cover what we can in this episode and in our following episodes.
Oak wrote in and shared that he's been a fan of EarthBound since grade school when he found out about it via Smash Brothers and the Happy Video Game Nerds review. He played EarthBound on the SNES and tried playing EarthBound Beginnings as a kid, but, in EarthBound Beginnings, he didn't make it too far. However, our show inspired him to pick it up again. He says, "I'm so glad I decided to stick through and finish this fantastic game. It has such a unique vibe about it that I don't think I've ever experienced in any other game. I'm not sure if y'all will agree with me, but something about it is distinctly, the weather is starting to get cold and people are getting ready to put Halloween decorations out, but it's not quite fall yet. Something about the color palette strikes that chord with me."
It's not just you, Oak. We've heard people say similar things. It's funny how personalized the experience of playing these games can be. Depending on how much information you have going into it, you may interpret them very differently.
Oak goes on to say, "Now that I've finished the game, I've been trying to finish other older RPGs like Final Fantasy IV. This podcast has really helped me appreciate the finer details of these older games where you need to read between the lines and use a bit of your imagination to pick up on characters' personalities and such." And Jess, he has a question for the both of us.
Oh yeah?
If we could have a meal with anyone from EarthBound Beginnings, who would it be? Oak says he'd like to eat with Ulrich, that weird two-faced blue thing floating around Magic Ant's underflow. He wants to know which mouth gets the food and which one does the talking.
Good question. Ulrich's a good one, Oak. We didn't talk much about them, but they're easily the weirdest being in Magicant. As for me, I think I would want to share a meal with Queen Mary. She's so nice that I imagine she's an incredible hostess. I can only dream of the majestic masticatory morsels of Magicant that might be served. How about you, Kat?
Peppermint escargot. Ooh la la. Good choice, Jess. Well, as for me, Ninten's mom works real hard. Taking care of 3 kids, making steak all the time. So, I'm gonna treat her. I'm gonna take her out to Marysville and hit up a fancy restaurant.
That sounds like a good time. Dinner and a show. Maybe she'll vent about her husband and reveal the secret of Ninten's dad.
That's the plan.
Henry Entertainment System wrote in and said that they're especially a fan of our Dimensional Slip episodes.
Awesome.
Our last Dimensional Slip was with Jazzy, who directed EarthBound USA and the EarthBound Saga fan films. And Henry says that the mention of EarthBound Saga reminded them of a similar project called Mother Saga. You ever heard of that, Kat?
Not until Henry mentioned it. It turns out it's a project directly inspired by EarthBound Saga and chronicles all of EarthBound Beginnings in a nearly 2-hour movie.
Whoa.
It's filmed by a group of kids between 8 and 14 years old back in 2009.
Wowza.
We'll link to where you can watch it on this episode's page. As Jess said, we've got more letters in our mailing bag than we can read in one episode, so there's more to come. But before we wrap this up, here's a few quick notes from fans sharing facts.
Dallas writes in with an interesting detail about Lloyd.
Do tell.
So, in Japanese, Lloyd's name is actually a bit of wordplay. What we'd spell Lloyd in Japanese is phonetically spelled ro-i-do, roido, or roid. And roido is short for roido megane, Japanese for round glasses with thick plastic rims.
Ha ha ha! Wow, a secret pun. Secret cross-language pun.
Yay!
That's so cool.
Dallas also posited a simple solution to the mystery of the gynoid names Jane, Caroline, and Susie.
Yeah, we talked about that, like how, they changed them in the States to reference specific people. We don't know what these Americanized names in Japan means. So hit me.
Dallas points out that the games are full of contradictory energies, like being bright and colorful but dealing with really heavy themes, and that happens frequently in character naming conventions. For instance, Teddy is a muscular, tough guy gang leader, but it's named after a stuffed animal. So for scary, violent robots, why not sweet, old-timey names? It's a simple, sinister juxtaposition, and it could be part of alien infiltration. And this is a wild theory. Ninten's mom's name is Carol. There's a gynoid named Caroline, and the suffix "-ine" means to resemble.
Wow. That is a very intriguing theory, Dallas. I love it. It's two-layered. It can't possibly be, but that's delightful. I mean, I'd love to see one of those things try to impersonate Ninten's mom. That would be horrifying. Another letter, Matt, a.k.a. Jazzy, wrote in and shared that he agrees about the Kraftwerk EarthBound interpolation that we discussed in our last Dimensional Slip with Jazzy Benson, different Jazzy. He thinks that this interpolation has got to be intentional and shared something that I totally forgot. That interpolation is in EarthBound Beginnings also. Thanks, Matt. I didn't catch this until we started our ascent of Mount Itoi. You'll hear us discuss this in a future episode. Matt goes on to say that EarthBound Beginnings' whole soundtrack is, quote, filled with bangers, and it is incredible what they did with the limited hardware. Even having never played the game, it fills Matt with excitement, big emotions, and nostalgia.
An appropriate note for this episode.
Very much so. And Tyra from Sweden wrote in to be sure that we made the connection between Pippi's last name, Lindgren, and the author of Pippi Longstockings, Astrid Lindgren. And I think we mentioned that in an earlier episode. But if not, that's where Pippi's last name comes from. Thanks, Tyra. I was delighted to get this verified by someone from Pippi's home country.
Shout out to Alex Amelia Pine, Wilya M., Sanjay Shukla, Cooper Angela 2292, Grammar Gremlin, Arconic, Starman Rowe, and everyone who's left us an Apple Podcast review, Spotify, and YouTube comment, or send us a kind email. We really, truly appreciate it.
YouTube. Thanks for reminding me. A little bit of housekeeping. As Google Podcasts has gone away, you can now listen to Mother She Wrote on YouTube. It's on the same channel that features Jess's playthrough of the games.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, hello! Please consider subscribing for more episodes and more videos of me playing the Mother games.
Oh, maybe you should say that in a shouty, obnoxious YouTuber voice.
Like and subscribe!
As you are likely well aware, Mother She Wrote is a listener-supported show, and it's thanks to wonderful folks just like you that we're able to pay our actors and, well, exist. I'm excited to share that we have a new, super streamlined way to support the show and listen to early episodes. It's called Supporting Cast.
There's no complicated login, just sign up and boom. It easily connects to the podcast player of your choice, and you instantly have access to all our episodes ad-free, bonus material, and early releases.
This is extra special, particularly at the moment, because if you want to hear Jess and I's discussions about EarthBound Beginnings, the entire season is up right now.
Yep. We're still hard at work on the audio drama parts, but we've uploaded all our conversations about the game so you can follow along. They're all online for supporters, and as soon as we've got the audio drama segments finished, our supporters will get access to them first. Just head to mothershewrote.earth/support and click the Supporting Cast banner.
Our Patreon is still alive and well, and actually it's the better deal. Our patrons get access to episodes and bonus material for all the shows that we make here at Omniverse, not just Mother She Wrote, including exclusive series like City of Demons, an immersive tabletop RPG experience starring Jess and I. And we also have regular updates from me on what we're working on. But there's a trade-off. Patreon has a more complicated sign-up procedure and isn't made specifically for podcasts. But Supporting Cast is. It's easy and breezy.
Put simply, if you like what we do and are able to help us continue to do it, please consider supporting us. And if you do, we've got 2 great options depending on how deep you want to go.
All of our early releases and ad-free episodes are yours for the price of a single cup of coffee. And our hours of infotainment will last you longer than it does. You can scope it all out at mothershewrote.earth/support. And I wrote some fun copy for the Supporting Cast page, so give it a look at the very least. It'll make you smile.
Maybe it'll make you do more than smile. Go check it out.
mothershewrote.earth/support. That's all for now. We'll see you next time. With us now is Pixelh8.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk with you. But first, we have to ask the most important question of all. What is your favorite pizza?
I do love pizza. I have to stay away from it quite a lot now because I'm on like a fitness journey, but I'm quite boring in that I just like pepperoni. I just like lots of pepperoni on my pizza. I'm happy with that. I like a lot of it. That's the problem. Yeah.
Not the first, and I guarantee it won't be the last time we hear somebody say that just a plain pepperoni pizza is their favorite.
So Pixelh8, these days we just throw around the word chiptunes and everyone seemingly knows what it means, but younger listeners may not realize that there was a time where chiptunes music wasn't really a thing. Like, it was not in vogue. It had to come back.
Yes.
Could you share with us a bit of your journey as a chiptunes artist?
I started very informally in about 88, 89.
Wow.
My baby sister came into my bedroom. I was playing on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the NES. She came in, wanted, me to do something. I can't remember what. And she smashed my Nintendo with her baby bottle. She was only 2. She was running around the house and she hit it, knocking it on the floor, dislodging the cartridge and making the noise just go freeze. Like you can get that sometimes. They go doo. And I was quite into hip hop music at the time and sampling. And obviously, if you go back and listen to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it has quite good bass on it.
It does.
Because it uses a triangle wave quite prominently. And that got me thinking, oh, that's quite interesting. I never considered the NES as making music, just video game music in the past. So I very dangerously popped it open and just kept whacking a screwdriver inside of it while it was turned on and making it freeze up and making it jam at different points and sampling that with my friend Roddy. His dad was a professional radio DJ and he had one of those early samplers with those, they have those video shows with the terrible sound effects when somebody says something cheesy and something triggers off. Well, we just loaded it full of NES samples of me freezing stuff. We were doing terrible rap songs over NES samples, but it got me thinking about how to use these machines as musical instruments as opposed to just kind of things that you play on. And I think that was what I class as the first wave of chiptune music, is that we're taking the notes that somebody else has already put into a machine and kind of hacking them a bit and sampling them and turning them into music. And it went away for a bit like most things do. I didn't really think about it. I realized I couldn't rap very well, so I thought I'd put that to the side and move on. I joined like a really bad cover band. I was in an REM cover band. We were awful.
Oh, what were you called?
We were called ERM. Quite literally, when I phoned up and spoke to the promoter for our first gig, I suddenly realized we didn't have a name. And when he asked me, so what's your band? I said, and he wrote down ERM. So we were on the poster. It's ERM. He's like, well, I thought you were an REM cover band. I was like, we are, but we're not. I don't know what we are. But then we were ERM for a while. So then we just went with it. But I really love the orchestration in REM songs, like Night Swimming, all of those. I really, really loved it.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford an orchestra, no surprise, because I was a teenager in 1994, 95. And I use a thing called Deluxe Music Construction Set on the Amiga 500, which was bloody awful. I learnt that I could take the Amiga 500 and put it through a Zoom guitar pedal to add reverb to the strings to get it to sound a bit fuller, to make it sound a little bit more interesting. And then, I got more and more involved in electronic music. People like Bjork was coming out, Avex Twin was coming out. I got more into trackers and there was awful samplers on the Amiga 500. I just dug out so many bad songs from when I was younger. It's brilliant. But I liked the Amiga and I liked sampling, but I really, really missed the simplicity of pulse waves on the NES and stuff like that, because my childhood was spent in arcades. We don't have those really anymore. We have these weird things that they just have like a few machines in a bowling alley somewhere. And everything is prize orientated. If you play on an arcade machine, it's always about getting tokens. So I was like, no, it's about actually playing the game.
It's about going on an adventure, damn it.
Yes,
Right.
It's about hearing the chaos. My girlfriend hates arcades because she says it's got loads and loads of noises and sounds in it. Like, that's exactly why I love it, because I love the clash of all the different sound waves and stuff like that. So when I got a PC and I had the ability to almost produce any sound imaginable, I thought, I don't want to do that. I want to actually go back and learn about all the historical machines. I want to learn about all the machines that I missed. because I traveled from England to America, back to England. And in that swap over period, I missed a lot of interesting machines. We over here had probably about 60 different home computers. In America, I think you had like the Commodore 64 and Apple II and a few others. But over England, we had like everybody in their garage was chucking out their own homemade computers, which was brilliant. So I used the PC and the internet to go back and actually learn about all these different machines and start actually writing software for that. So that's my kind of second wave, where I start writing the software on the devices. Like the Game Boy, I wrote a cartridge for that, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, and so on. I just started writing my own software and making music from that. Because I don't master my albums, I don't add EQ, I don't put any effects on it. If I want to have like an echo, I will repeat the note again and again at lower volume, much like what they do on the Mother soundtrack.
Heck yes. That's a really authentic use of the hardware, making sounds within the scope of the original instruments. So that takes us to the mid-aughts, and by then the term chiptune is coming into use. The retro chip sound is gradually returning to music and pop culture at large. Your first full-length chiptune album, Video Games Ruined My Life, came out in 2006. You released 2 more records in 2007 and 2009. And you and your software are forces at the forefront of the genre. So what happened next?
I kind of got to a point, I think, around 2009, 2010, where I thought I kind of hit the glass ceiling of chiptune music, if there was such a thing, in that I had gone from literally my dining room table to performing at the Brighton Dome with Imogen Heap. I went to the National Museum of Computing at Bletchley Park, where Alan Turing worked. I became part of the Alan Turing Centenary Committee to get him pardoned by the Queen, which was really, really cool. So I got involved in all those different things through my music. So it was, that for me, that was like peak. I've done it. I can't do anything better than that, really. So I don't know if anybody knows this, but while I was working on my 4th album, lightning actually hit the side of my house, side of the building where I was. So I was working on it and I was backing up everything at that point in time. So I had the backup hard drive connected and the computer connected, and it all went. Everything for the 4th album, which is kind of a blessing because I was just starting to do a lot more educational work, a lot more academic work, writing about how to use technology in a creative way to encourage people to get more confidence in themselves, to go out into the world and make stuff. And so I kind of took that as a sign. I thought, I'm going to go away and I'm going to build this school and you can see what happens. I'm going to try an 8-week pilot, which is now its 12th anniversary of the school. So we've had alumni come through here who've worked on the latest Sonic games, who've worked on like Horizon Zero Dawn. Those kids have come through us. So it's really, really lovely that we have such a massive alumni. But when you are a creative person, unfortunately, it's like this burning thing that will eventually come back to you. And I kind of had to push music away. It's a really sad and horrible thing to do to yourself. But I took music and I just put it over there. I was like, I can't go on any of those adventures because whenever I do anything musical, I end up on the most insane adventures. I just unbelievable stuff. I've met so many big celebrities and been invited around the house to these crazy parties. And it's like, I'm teetotal. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. I eat like Haribo, like gummy bears and cake. I am the most, I'm just there. It's lovely to meet you, but I don't do any of that stuff. But I end up going on crazy adventures, essentially. So I had to kind of force music over there. And to do that, I forced myself to listen to 3 albums for 12 years. That's it.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's
how does one even do that?
That's like celibacy?
Yes. It's probably worse.
Well, what were the 3 albums?
Yeah, we have to know.
It's Prince Purple Rain,
Okay.
Black Crowes, Southern Harmony Musical Companion, and Taylor Swift, 1989.
Wow.
That's it. Can you handle those for 12 years?
No. I
No.
can't.
I know, but it was what I had to do. I had to stop myself from encountering new music. I had to prevent myself. Because if I mishear a part of music or hear a part of music incorrectly, my brain will construct the rest of it. It will just go, oh, add this, and this. Like if I hear music in the other room and it's muffled, my brain will just go.
Interesting.
And then here's the rest of it. So it's really quite dangerous because I end up tinkering with things and messing around with things, and I just forget other things because music is all encompassing. So it was very, very difficult. So it was very, very cruel of what I did to myself in that respect. But I had a responsibility to the children I was working with to build this school, to get it sustainable, to make sure that they could get their education. These are SEN kids, a lot of them, special education needs kids. And they're all on the spectrum. They have depression, anxiety. They're afraid of the world. And we're just trying to get them to be a bit more confident in themselves, to go out and be who they want to be, do what they want to do, and use technology to help them with that. So I took it quite seriously. But unfortunately, I made a fatal mistake in that I took my son to see Stop Making Sense by Talking Heads.
Oh, that movie will change you. Uh-oh.
Oh my goodness.
Just a note here, because we were so excited we talked over Pixelh8. That's Stop Making Sense, Talking Heads' landmark 1984 concert film directed by Jonathan Demme. Widely considered to be the greatest concert film of all time. It changed my life the first time I saw it. And, well.
So I just sat there when they started singing, and the absolute joy of the musical performance and of the people on stage. I just thought, oh God, I'm going to go back to music, aren't I? And, you know, so that happened. And I just kind of sitting in the audience thinking, I love what I'm seeing on the screen, but I just want to run out and just start recording music and start writing music. And so we went to see that film about 5 times.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really, really good for me, but there were a lot of tears. There were a lot of tears. And there has been a lot of tears all throughout this album. And then a couple of days later, I do a lot of security work for our government here in the UK, various things, let's just say. So I know a lot of really, really techie people. And I was just talking to this guy who works for one of the agencies, and he was repairing a hard drive that was hit by an explosive device. And it was in fragments. And he said, I can bring anything back, mate. I can just lay it on the table, chuck it on the table. So I gave him my hard drive that was hit by lightning 12 years ago. And within 24 hours, he had recovered 80% of what I'd written.
Wow.
So all these things happened within the space of about 3 days. Then the third thing was I contacted Imogen Heap, who is my fairy godmother. She looks after me. She taught me everything about the music industry. She's the most wonderful person. If you ever get to meet her and talk to her, you'll see what I mean. She's lovely, absolutely lovely. So she invited me to her house to meet loads of other musicians. And I felt weird because I was a musician and I was surrounded by musicians. And I had to decide kind of then, am I talking as a musician or am I talking as I was a musician to these people? And it kind of clicked in my head. I thought, oh my God, there's so many things saying you're going to go down this route now. You don't really have a choice. Your hard drive's fixed. You've got some time off over Christmas. You've got bloody talking heads in your head. You know, there's no escape from this. That's now. You're
a different kind of lightning bolt.
Yeah, it was. I described it as being hit by a ton of pillows. You know, it's just like it was nice. It was nice, but there's no escaping from it, none whatsoever. It all hit me at once. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go back. I did get all the demos back on that hard drive, but I think it's good they were hit by lightning. If I'm honest, they were very much of the time and who I was hanging around, and they were slowly sounding more unlike me. And I was listening to too many other people and too many people's views on my music. I'd done some software for like Damon Albarn for Plastic Beach. And there were songs on my album which I started to incorporate bass on. And then I listened to it and I thought, that's not me. That's being influenced, and that's okay. But I have to get back to absolutely who I was when I started as Pixelh8. And with this album, I think I've gone back to, if it's not coming out of a chip, it's not going in my album, basically.
Amazing.
Now, what I did when all my music stopped is I actually gave away all of my equipment. Every single piece of my equipment. It's like the Infinity Stones scattered across. Like there's parts of it in Japan, there's parts of it in America. Any chip tuner that asked me for anything, I was like, here, I've got one, you can have it. It's gone.
Yeah.
So I had to rebuild everything from scratch. So it was a matter of me very naughtily re-breaking into every console I've ever hacked into again and coming back. But along this journey, I learned how to do something which was just like, oh my God, where did I learn that? And I hadn't consciously thought of it, But we're experiencing what we call bit rot in tech. Essentially, things are slowly breaking down, like old media, old magnetic media, old consoles. The joints are drying up. Everything's just stopping working because they weren't manufactured to the highest standards, really. They were quite terrible. So I was experiencing a lot of these secondhand consoles I was buying was just exploding, and that was it. And it's just like, I could resolder every joint in there and kind of work through it. Or I could just take out the sound chip and build a computer around it. So I just thought, I thought I will get the sound chip and I will just put it onto an Arduino.
Wow.
So essentially what I've done is I've got a 4 megahertz chip for the oscillator. I've got the sound chip and I've got an Arduino. And that is a BBC Micro. It's this huge, clunky British computer, massive thing that I used to have to take on stage. I can now fit into a Game Boy shell.
Amazing.
And once I learned how to do one, it was almost like you could do this with every machine. I can now take a Commodore 64 and fit it into a Game Boy shell. I can now take a ZX Spectrum, a NES, a SNES, all of them. So they're all massive machines that all needed a separate screen, separate power supplies, all of that, all USB powered, tiny little device I could fit into my hands. So my live setup went from being this 4-desk electrical nightmare, which anything could go wrong, into this really lovely briefcase I could just pop open and this rainbow of Game Boys pop up and I just play.
That's really neat.
And trigger off things through it. And it avoids all patents, all legalities, all those problems, all those kind of cease and desist letters, all of that stuff is now gone because I'm not evading their security. I've completely removed any security issues whatsoever. I'm just directly accessing the chip. I'm literally feeding bits into the sound chip brain. So this is the third wave of chiptune in that we're now saving the chips in these machines to carry on making music with them.
Wow.
I could go and buy broken machines and just harvest the chips from them and get them working again.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's a lovely thing to kind of come back and kind of do a reclamation of the computer chips.
So this new technique means you have a bigger arsenal of sounds at a fraction of the physical size. Is there anything different you can do with the sound chips themselves?
I can't do anything different with the chips that I couldn't do when they were inside the machine. So they can only do the same things, but they're a lot more friendly. They're a lot more reliable in terms of I can say, play this note and it'll play that note and the machine won't explode. So that's where I am.
That's really cool.
I literally have a desk full of computer chips in front of me. Like these are arcade sound chips. These are like the ones they're using like Bubble Bobble and ZX Spectrums, and they actually have loads of them.
Amazing.
It's kind of good and bad, I think, but that's who I am.
Yeah.
So
Amidst all of your journeys, physically and sonically, where was the first place you encountered EarthBound or the Mother series?
I kind of missed it. I think it was actually my son. He kind of started playing it. He's like, don't you know about this game? I listened to the whole soundtrack multiple times recently, and it works as music. And that's the good thing about it, is it's not just chiptune music. It's somebody who knows how to write music who put it onto the system, as opposed to somebody who has only experienced writing on the system, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
They're clearly very accomplished outside of just writing on that platform.
Yeah, that's actually something that we'd love to know more about. What it actually takes to write music for the NES, what it's like to, compose songs on that hardware. What were Keiji Suzuki and Hip Tanaka working with to make the score to Mother?
On the NES, you have essentially 5 channels to make sounds with, 5 different voices. You have 2 channels which are what we call pulse waves, so they're square waves. They can be set to different kind of parameters. So I'll play you like a square wave, so something like that. That's a square wave. That's at 50-50. Or you can change it to different kind of, you have 12.5, 25, 50, and 75. And so I'm having to code this while we talk. So you can kind of see the different sounds that you can generate, but then you can obviously change the volume sweeps of it. So you can create different pulses like that. So you can get more percussive instruments like vibraphones or glockenspiels and stuff like that. Lovely higher pitch sounds are a bit problematic sometimes, because the higher you go, you can't divide the clock speed as well. So you get all kinds of problems. But they managed to keep it pretty good on that soundtrack, I have to say. But then you have a triangle wave, which is beautiful. You hear it in all the bass notes on all the games. And even on like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all the bass is triangle wave, which is brilliant because it just fits it perfectly. It cuts through everything. Then the fourth channel is basically a noise channel where you can change it to make kind of drums. So I'll play you some drum kind of sound effects. So, and how you use that together will give you the basis of a small little rock band, vocals, lead guitar, bass, and drums. And you have a fifth channel, but it's very rarely ever used. They do use it in the Mother soundtrack. They use it for a drum sample on the Tank Attack, which is like almost borderline Aphex Twin, which is
Yes.
which he just really goes for. As I was thinking, how fast can he play that sample in the game soundtrack? So they do use that. And if you think back to like Super Mario Bros. 3, the kind of Caribbean percussion in Super Mario Bros. 3, that was a sample. It's a 1-bit sample.
Wow.
So it's really, really low quality sample, but you could get all kinds of vocal samples and stuff like that. They often sounded really terrible, but actually at the same time really good. So you're working within those limitations. It shows when somebody knows how to make music outside of chiptune, when they actually start making chiptune music. If they just make chiptune music, it almost always sounds like boof, 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 and then some random crazy melody that doesn't ever settle. You hear that all the time. But with this soundtrack, it's fairly obvious that the composer Hikazu Tanaka, he studied music because he was able to emulate so many different styles within it, like the hippie battle and stuff like that.
Yeah, with the Johnny B. Good-esque thing. And I know figuring out how to emulate the note bend for like the blues guitar was like a huge thing for them. Like, I've been thinking about this. Let's see if we can make it work.
Yeah, he was very fortunate because he had the actual hardware that you were meant to compose on the Nintendo with. But it's now come to a point where most chiptuners can see how they did it. And it's a case of the Nintendo system is set up so you can basically you set the volume of the initial note, and then it's like an ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, reverb. But you can also do pitch bends, and you can say how long you want the pitch bends, and then you can create another note to bend the note back down afterwards. So it probably took him some time, and I think just the sheer fact that there are about 40 musical cues on that soundtrack is pretty astonishing. And really runs the gamut of different musical styles. It's all over the place in terms of what it does, and I think that was quite exciting. There's references to Beach Boys, there's blues, there's jazz, there's reggae music in there. You can hear it all. It wasn't video game music, it was parodying our real world up to a point. There's almost two worlds in Mother, the kind of real world and then this hyper kind of cinematic world. All the happy moments are kind of like real world music, all the songs that we would recognize, all the styles that we would recognize. And then when anything bad or drastic happens, it's quite cinematic or quite intense. There's some kind of awareness of working between them. And it is all over the place, but that's okay because the core kind of main themes pull it back together. And I think it does give that kind of feeling of two worlds, of the broader cinematic world and the everyday life of it. And I think that's how they use the music in the game.
I've never heard anybody explicitly say that. And Matt, I think that's such a really profound analysis of it, because even the game itself has the world that you go into, the fantasy realm underneath all of the rest of reality, in addition to just like the stepping from your neighborhood into like some kind of very terrifying science fiction scenario. And so that idea of going into different realities, whether it was ever articulated like that or not, like definitely is part of what Itoi was hoping to express with the game. And it's really, you've really put the nail on the head of like how the music does that.
When you write something like a soundtrack, when you really know what the game is about and you know where the narrative is heading, you start sewing in motifs and you can start really kind of understanding, okay, well, this song is in this key. I can overlay that melody over this later on, and I can slowly build up a kind of form. It actually helps the flow of any story if you can do that. You have that opportunity to kind of sew parts of the narrative into earlier parts of the story. It's like, oh, well, I know something's going to happen here, and I've written that piece of music. If I grab some of that music and pull it forward through the narrative, then it kind of not signposts it, but kind of makes it more explainable why it did happen later on. And I think that's done quite a few times in this soundtrack. The everyday music, the jazz, the blues, the kind of 1960s music and the rock music, that's safe, isn't it? That's the known. There's one called Live House, which is the blues track.
Yeah.
And that, you would hear that on any 12-bar blues. So you're familiar with it. That's the familiar, the known world. And then you go into that ethereal, more cinematic, unknown world, which is kind of expressed through like much slower pieces, more legato arpeggios and stuff like that. It's very, very split. It's kind of almost like diegetic music. So music that's in that world, and non-diegetic music, which is the more cinematic stuff. That's how it feels.
Yeah, well, what you mentioned about the diegetic thing is actually like pretty important. Like there's a scene early on where Ninten goes into the superintendent's office of a zoo, and there's this really harsh atonal thing that's going on with the music. And then you come to find out that was actually diegetic the whole time. It wasn't just the mood. That was like a thing that was happening to the environment. I remember being surprised by that the first time I played it.
So when it comes to music from our world, some of the standout songs in the game are pop songs that were written as pop songs and transposed into the NES.
Yeah, just in thinking about what I've heard in my own life on the NES, I struggle to think of any other game that included music that was intentionally pop music like this. Is it as unique as I think it is in that regard?
I think it is. I think the only other soundtrack to a game that really just goes off on one is a game called Pictionary. If you ever hear Pictionary on the NES, I don't know what was going on in that. The guy just like, I know this is meant to be like a calm drawing game, but I'm just going to go off and do whatever I want musically.
Wow.
And it is amazing. Well, I don't think anybody was that kind of forward thinking. I think most video game music of the time was either cinematic or trying to be cinematic in a big open world kind of score, or jazz. It was a lot of jazz.
The city pop influence was strong at the time.
Yes. Yeah, you can reroute everything almost back to jazz almost all the time. There was a few exceptions like Journey to Silius, which is a beautiful soundtrack by Sunsoft. But a lot of it just goes back to jazz. So I think this soundtrack, it relies on the listener to be familiar with all those different genres to kind of go, oh, this I feel okay at this moment in the game. And then when something really tense happens, they throw all of that away. So you have those kind of mnemonic associations with the music. It just throws all the happiness away and gives you some terrifying microtonal music.
So what are some other highlights for you from the Mother score?
The airplane journey, I love it because it's just like pure rock.
Yeah.
It's basically like 80s hair metal. I think it's a brilliant kind of analysis of what was going on in terrible rock music at the time, because I think it plays every note possible at some point in time in a song just to show that it could. The ghost stuff is by far the best. Some of the alien music or the alien sounds, not quite hitting the right frequencies, and the delays that don't quite land properly but are still there. It makes it even more eerie. There's loads of augmented fifths and diminished notes to unsettle you. It's like Jimi Hendrix in, Purple Haze. But those notes are just slightly too far apart, and you can't quite find your bass. It takes quite a lot to do that on the system. So it was quite forward thinking in that respect.
You mentioned composing on the hardware that it was meant to be composed on. Like, what is that? Like, do you happen to know, like, what were they looking at when they were coding this stuff?
I think they just had more kind of general MIDI software, but then they had somebody convert it over to a format that the NES would understand. Everything I've experienced with the NES, I've had to fight my way into.
Right.
Essentially, I don't have access to the same things that the composer, Hikazu Tanaka, had access to then. So if I want to learn how he did it, I'd have to load it up into an emulator and literally look through the hex of what's happening in the sound registers to kind of know that. But good music can survive any format. You can take something from the Mother soundtrack and have an orchestra perform it, and it'll still sound good because it's still good music. If it wasn't as good, it's not going to last outside of the format. If it's too reliant on the format, it's going to be a problem.
Well, they've certainly proved that time and again with the soundtrack, all the different reissuings of it that have happened,
Yeah.
and all the different formats and the existence of the soundtrack album.
I like the fact that they take it very seriously. That's a whole different culture, a whole different kind of view on video game music.
You noticed the work of Hip Tanaka in your life, prior to this conversation. Can you talk about discovering composers and him in particular?
Well, I think it's with any kind of soundtrack. When you start noticing the soundtrack, you start thinking about, well, who actually composed this? And luckily, we live in a world where we have things like the internet and we can kind of learn about what other things they've done. And he's completely revolutionized video game music with what he's done.
Yeah, he created sound effects for the original Mario and Donkey Kong games. He was composer of the score for Kid Icarus, Dr. Mario, Metroid.
Yes.
And famously, Tanaka didn't see a difference between the music he composed for video games and the music he composed in his personal life, which, considering all we've talked about, makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Actually, when I was looking up some more information on him, I learned something I didn't know. I'm a big Peter Gabriel fan, and apparently Tanaka is too, because the Metroid score was inspired by Gabriel's score for the film Birdie, specifically in that, as Tanaka put it, the score was dark until the very end, where the player would finally receive music with a strong melody. I thought that was really cool, especially considering the similarities between Metroid's sci-fi music and Mother's. But Matt, you surprised me when you mentioned that your favorite Tanaka score is for a game I've never heard of, Balloon Kid for the Game Boy, which is a sequel to Balloon Fight, which Tanaka also composed the music for?
Yes. With Balloon Kid, I think it's more video gamey music than Mother. I think it's more generic, but it's so happy. There's nothing bad in it. Everything's going to work out fine in that soundtrack. And I think that's why it stuck with me. And I love the opening bars. It just kind of waddles in. Ding, 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 ding. Very, very unexpectedly, and just hits you with this kind of epic score. And you could arrange that for an orchestra and it would sound just as good as anything else out there on an orchestra, because it has been very well considered while it was being made.
Yeah.
I think we're now experiencing the things that he's inspired, which is lovely. I mean, so many students come up to me and talk to me about Undertale, which I think is incredible on so many different levels. And people are like, why do you like Undertale? I was like, because it has this kind of music in it. It has really simple graphics. It actually has a plot. It has all these different ideas in it that you don't have in a lot of video games. Because I work with 8 to 16-year-olds, and you have this 10-year-old kid come up to me, have you ever heard of Undertale? And it's like, yes, I have. Have you heard this song? Yes, I have. And then they try and give me some kind of piece of trivia that they think that I might not know about it. And then I'll explain everything in the song, and they go, whoa, you're a nerd, sir. And I was like, yeah, I am. And that's okay. And that's because everybody in the school is like that. Everybody has that kind of knowledge of these songs and this music. And I actually see that kids go through their Minecraft phase, and then they usually go through like a Roblox phase, and then they go on to their Undertale phase, and then they might go on to Terraria or something else. And they go through these interesting kind of phases of their video game life. And luckily, chiptune music is still shaping that journey in the background, the music of it. So I think we're experiencing the next part of Hip Tanaka's influence, which is the games and the music that he's inspired in this generation. Kids are now listening to chiptune music because people were inspired to make chiptune music because he made chiptune music. That's where we are with that, I think. I love Undertale. Really cool. I love the soundtrack. I love the fact that some of the music apparently started out as a ROM hack of one of the Mother games. It's wonderful where different inspiration can come from. And we're now getting to experience his music in a different way through other musicians, which is a nice thing to have.
Yeah. It's quite the legacy of creation.
I mean, I'm still going to listen to Balloon Kid, but did you know that Hirokazu Tanaka is one of the most common names in Japan?
No.
They have an annual meetup of Hirokazu Tanaka's, about 178 regularly meet up.
Does he go? Does he play the show?
I don't know. I'd probably not. But it's one of the most common names.
Well, no wonder he calls himself Hip Tanaka then.
Yeah. Like, how else is anyone going to know who you are with all those other Hirokazu Tanakas running around?
Exactly.
Going back to what you were saying as far as what they were doing in the original Mother soundtrack and sort of the perspective on chiptune music as a whole. Some of the tracks on Hard Reset really kind of like hit me in the feels in the same way that some of the Mother soundtrack tracks do. Like Plot Armor and In-Game Current in particular were both really just like, oh my gosh, this sounds like something that could be like on a Mother soundtrack. It was evoking feelings of, a larger narrative. I don't know if that was intentional for you to put that in there, but that's what I was kind of getting from it.
The thing about this album was any music, is I do a lot of thinking before I make the album. I do a lot of thinking. And when I was doing the Old Grey Missile test, which in particular is highly amusing because I actually took apart a missile guidance system to make a synthesizer. Yeah.
Oh, you devil. I love this.
That track goes places too. It's wild.
Yeah. So when I was making it, it was originally 2 minutes and 43 seconds long. And I kind of felt it hadn't gone everywhere. As you say, it goes places. I felt it hadn't gone everywhere it needed to go. It was 2 minutes and 43 seconds. And I thought, well, if I make it any longer, it's going to be way longer than a normal chiptune song. And then I thought I could punch myself right now because I'm not making chiptune music. I'm just making music. And a song can be as long as it needs to be. So I thought, think about your favorite songs. Prince, Another Lonely Christmas. Any bloody Cure song goes on for hours. Yeah. All of my favorite songs of dread and drudgery and all those things are about 4 or 5 minutes. Suede, The Asphalt World, beautiful song, goes on for like 7 minutes. Yeah. Perfect song. Why can't a chiptune song be 5 minutes long? I felt like people were watching me as I extended the track, but I was like, oh, I'm going to try this out. And it just worked. And I thought, I'm not making a chiptune album. I'm just making music with chiptune instruments.
Yeah.
And that's what I went for on this album. That is where I am emotionally. That's where I am as a musician. I'm just trying to create interesting musical experiences. I'm not trying to fit into the chiptune genre because, if I'm honest, a lot of the chiptune genre is quite boring to me. A lot of it is bass drum, bass drum, bass drum, bass drum. And it's like, well, it's boring. My music is all over the place in terms of the actual genre. The chiptune is more the instrumentation.
Yeah. I mean, like, it can't be ignored how much Hard Reset takes you on a journey through many different genres, like dance, industrial, there's like score pieces. Like, it is a very diverse album.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So on Hard Reset, you're working with chipsets from the BBC Micro, ZX Spectrum, the Commodore 64, the Game Boy, and of course, the NES. Are there any particular songs or moments on the record that highlight your work on the NES?
There is a lot of sounds on Bitrot Nonstop, which were produced by the NES. A lot of the chaos is produced by that. That's using the noise channel very much so, because it has quite an explosive noise channel that you can feed data into quite fast. In a lot of anime, when they pull out of a sword and it goes pling like that. I was trying for about 6 hours to make that kind of sound with a NES. And I just thought, I don't know why I want to do this, but I want to do it. And so it took me like 6 hours and I managed to get it to do it with a NES.
And here's that sound.
2 seconds of a sample, which flies by in the destruction that is Bitrot Nonstop. I kind of felt good and bad about those 6 hours, making an anime unsheathing sound on a NES. I could have been doing this and this and this and the other, but I did that instead. But then I thought the product of those 6 hours was, one, I had a cool sound, and two, I really enjoyed it. And that's okay. It's nice to just go away and be alone and tinker with a creative process and not have to worry, is this going to make me loads of money? Is this going to pay the bills? It's just something that I have to get out of my head. And I don't know why I have to make that sound on that machine today, but that's what's going to happen. And until I've done it, I'm probably not going to eat, probably not going to do anything else, probably not going to answer any emails. And then it'll be done. And then no one will know about it.
Well, they do now. Let's hear it again.
It's a beautiful sound, and I spent hours doing it.
Oh, you've described the neurodivergent experience in a nutshell.
The more information that you put into a song, I don't mean like how many notes or how many words you put into it, but how much effort you put into constructing a song, it always pays off It always pays off.
Yeah.
Whenever you really think about stuff, it always kind of shows that you've thought about it in the end product.
I'm going to go back, listen to that track, and really savor the levels of it.
Now's probably a good time to reiterate that if you'd like to hear Pixelh8 unpack basically every track on the record, including elaborating on how he made the old gray missile test using chips from an actual missile guidance system, just search for Nerdy Show in your podcast player and find the episode Pixelh8's Hard Reset, released the same day as this episode of Mother, She Wrote.
2 interview episodes that are expanded and complement one another. But we're not quite done here yet. Pixelh8, you spent the last 12 years building an incredible sounding school. What can you tell us about it?
The school has gone from strength to strength, and it's been recognised by the UK Parliament with the only recognised UNICEF alternative provision in the UK. So all of the resources and the lesson plans that we create, we share with UNICEF so they can use them all over the world to teach other kids. We've done lots of workshops online with kids all over the world to teach them technology skills. I've won a BAFTA for the school.
It's awesome.
I got nominated 3 times for this award, and on the 3rd time, I thought, it's just taking the piss now. I literally showed up with hoodie and jeans and my pink Converse. I didn't even dress up. I just thought, look, you invited me. I'm gonna show up. Me and my son are gonna eat everything, and we're just gonna lounge around. And then I bloody won, and so I had to go on stage and accept the award from the head of Atari. And I was like, oh, yeah, cool. And he was like, didn't make much of an effort then. I was like, well, I did the other 2 times, but I just thought this is just a joke this time. So that was quite fun. Now that I've got my album out of the way, we're going to turn upstairs into a much bigger music studio for them now, a space where they can work on their music. I will show them how to use the hardware and everything, but I won't teach them how to write music. I don't want to curve the way they want to make music just because I make it in a certain way. I want them to make the music they want to. So it's quite nice to have music a part of both parts of my life now.
Yeah, that's so great. So you've recently announced that your next project is something called The Story of Love, a concerto for handheld device.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, I can tell you that I can't use the word Nintendo Game Boy. But essentially, it is me versus an orchestra using a Game Boy. I'm on Game Boy, and we have a lovely, huge orchestra playing very simple but interesting music to play along to. It's about me, I am the Game Boy, and the orchestra is my wonderful partner. It's a story of love.
But you've styled it you versus the orchestra. Why is that?
Yeah, because in the beginning, it was quite quite chaotic, as all good relationships are. But it all ended up all right in the end. So
wonderful.
Yeah. And I think it will draw people in from the chiptune electronica world, and I think it will draw people in from the more traditional world into electronica. So it'll throw those 2 together. I started the first notes in 2009, and I just put it in the drawer, and now I'm coming back to it. It's quite expensive to hire an orchestra to rehearse and to record. That's okay. I'm applying for funding. If we don't manage to get the funding, we're going to steal an orchestra. Me and my friend have a plan, and it will happen regardless of us getting funding or not. We'll manage to find an orchestra. I'm writing it so it's interesting enough that a professional orchestra will take it seriously, but simple enough that school orchestras can also use it.
Neat.
That's
so
really
they
cool.
can download the Game Boy ROM, press a button on it, and it'll perform all the Game Boy parts while the orchestra plays along to it. Because I found it quite shocking that schools have to actually license the music to perform in their schools. And I wasn't cool with that. I'm not cool with that at all. So I thought, if I make a piece of music that's going to engage them with chiptune music, but also with their more traditional instruments, then I think if I can make it so that it's playable by a novice as well, then we might be able to get more performances out of it. I think it would be wild if I saw a school play this piece of music. So I did do a song on my last album called You Were Born to Save the World.
One of my favorites.
Well, I used the orchestra, but I really wanted to kind of expand it a lot bigger because I really love orchestral music, concert music. I don't listen to the kind of orchestral music I'm going to write. I listen to like Penderecki and Ligeti and like really horrible, scary stuff like Schoenberg and Bartok and like miserable stuff. But the music I'm writing isn't that. Like I listen to the Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima. That's a banger.
Yeah, that's a heavy one.
That's a beautiful piece of music, but I'm not going to write that kind of music. That's certainly inspired me to kind of look at music on that scale. And again, it's that whole idea of I'm not writing chiptune music. I'm writing music with chiptune instruments. And that's a whole different mentality. It's like, where else can I go with this now that I've got that mentality? And it's often very strange when you realize that you've had a certain mentality towards something, and then you kind of step back from it and think, I was a bloody idiot for about 20 years. I could have had this much wider view on things if I would have just stopped, shut up, and moved back a bit and thought, I'm actually a musician. I'm not just an electronic musician. I'm a proper musician, if you like.
Well, it's hard when the whole world's trying to keep you down like that.
I know. But if I could bring an orchestra to my little town just to perform this weird and wacky music, I think that would be quite a considerable eye-opener for people. Because in our town, we don't have really anything. Like, it's like a truck stop on the edge of nowhere. So if we could have an orchestral performance in this town with electronic music, I think that would be quite a significant thing. I don't want to write it and then go off to London and have it performed because it wouldn't be as good of an experience for me and for the people who I want to hear it. Yeah, but we'll see. If I'm in the news for stealing an orchestra, you'll know why.
That's the high story that I want to see made.
Yeah. So it's
sort of a Robin Hood thing, really.
Yeah, I'm going to have to learn how to steal a bus and or drive a bus and then like somehow trick the bus driver to get off and then swap all the music sheets in some kind of 80s heist movie situation. And then
it sounds like a Muppets plot.
Yeah, it'd be great. It'll work out. If we had the Muppets involved, it would work out every time. Every time.
Totally.
They have plot armor.
They do.
Speaking of, we're actually going to close out this episode with plot armor, so you fine folks can get a taste of Pixelh8's new record.
Before we go, Matt, Pixelh8, where should folks look for you out in the digital realm?
I'm pretty much everywhere, but bizarrely, I'm mostly on TikTok, Pixelh8 Music. I'm on Instagram as well. If you want to hear more of my music, it's best to go on TikTok at Pixelh8 Music.
And we'll have links to where you can find all of your records on this episode's page.
And actually, there's something new that Pixelh8 has launched since this interview was recorded, a project called Alterniverse, music for retro games that don't exist in our reality.
So, soundtrack songs from fictional games from another universe, where each track is composed entirely on the sound chips of a specific game console.
Like Storms of Arcadia, an adrenaline-fueled sci-fi shooter for the Sega Mega Drive, Kaze no Uta, a Japan-only Game Boy release, and the haunting Scarlet Mansion for Super Nintendo.
Pixelh8 is releasing a track a month for the next 12 months via his recently launched Patreon.
Personally, I'm really excited to see what he does with the sampling capabilities of the SNES.
Heck yes, big same.
Hear the songs and help support the creation of his work at patreon.com/Pixelh8. That's Pixelh8.
This has been incredible, Matt. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. It's been a
thank
real
you.
pleasure.
Thank you for having a chat.
Hard Reset is out now wherever you stream music. Physical media is on the way. Check out this episode's page for all the links. Taking us out is Plot Armor by Pixelh8. Mother She Wrote is made possible thanks to the generous support of our producers, Amber Devereaux, Austin Brown, Becky Scott Fairley, Bob Hogan, CB, Danielle McDonald, Joe Tankrasiardelli, Josh King, Max Hansen, Mjolnir MK86, Patrick Webster, Sean Hutchinson, Sean T. Red, and our super deluxe executive producers, Big Bad Shadow Man, Marcus Larson, and Jamieson Lalone.
You can join the team on Patreon or supporting cast. Just head to mothershewrote.earth/support. And if you think Mother She Wrote is simply smashing, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. And be sure to subscribe via your favorite podcast player.
This series is recorded and produced in Orlando, Florida, and Louisville, Kentucky, on lands stolen from their indigenous people, the Timucua and Seminole, and Shawnee, Cherokee, Osage, Seneca Iroquois, Miami, Hopewell, and Adena.
Acknowledgement of the first peoples of these lands and the lasting repercussions of colonization is just the beginning of the restorative work that is necessary. Through awareness, we can prompt allyship, action, and ultimately decolonization.
For links to aid indigenous efforts and to learn more about the First Nations of the land where you live, visit omniverse.media/landback.
Mother She Wrote is written, produced, and performed by me, Jessica Mudd.
And me, Kat Blackard. Our original score is composed and performed by Jess.
Mother She Wrote is not affiliated with Nintendo, Shigesato Itoi, or any rights holders of the Mother and EarthBound intellectual properties. Please play the game's official Nintendo releases.